Okay, hi everybody, it's Emma. I'm back, and you can tell by the title from this video, we're going to be talking about every book that I read in October. If anybody knows where to get a lid that will work on this cup that isn't the lid that I got at the movie theater, I would appreciate that. Okay, so I read 20 books in October. It's kind of crazy. Let's talk about, so 20 books. I think I read so many books. I mean, that's actually only one more book than I, like, that's pretty average number of books for me, if I'm being totally honest. Alright, let's start. So the first book that I read in October was The Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James. This is oh, I did talk about this book. Some of these books I've talked about before, so I'm not going to go super in-depth. This one I read for my reading fall thrillers, or just reading thrillers in fall video. Go watch that if you want to see me read some fall thrillers. But this is a book about a woman who kind of runs she has like a website for kind of like cold cases and like doing information on cold cases and shit. And so she gets wrapped up in this cold case from her town, Clear Lake, Oregon, about a woman that murdered 2 men, supposedly, but was never convicted. So she gets sort of wrapped up in that, trying to solve that, and figure out what actually happened. I didn't love this book. I think that, for one, it got a little paranormal, which I wasn't expecting, and I think took it in an entirely different direction than what I actually thought it was going to be. And 2, you find out kind of halfway through what actually happened. And then I feel like all mystery after that is sort of gone. So, well, I am glad that I read this book and finally got it off my TBR. I'm not necessarily, it wasn't the worst book I've ever read, but I'm not scrambling to pick up more books from this author because it just ultimately was just disappointing to me. And I didn't love it. And that's unfortunate because, I don't know, I feel like it was really hyped up last year. But looking for like a fall rainy kind of thriller, then maybe pick this up. But for me, it just didn't. It wasn't what I wanted, what I was expecting, and I think that I was just disappointed. And I read Fourth Wing. I actually made a whole reading vlog about this, so I'm not going to talk really about it at all. But if you know, you know. So go watch that reading vlog to see me like talk in depth about Fourth Wing. But spoiler alert, I liked it. Also, happy November. Happy Iron Flame release month. I'm scared for Iron Flame. 1, because it's 640 pages. 2, so far it actually has 3.7 stars on storygraph. That's not good. And 4th, I don't know when I'm gonna get to read it. Like, do I just go out and buy it? Do I just go balls to the wall with that? I don't know. This isn't relevant in this wrap-up, but in case you're wondering, I will try to read Iron Flame as fast as I can. Okay. First 2 books down. Easy peasy. I've already talked about them a lot in depth. Now there's some books that I haven't talked about in depth. First one being A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is the 2nd book in the From Blood and Ash series, and I've been trying to read this book for months. Finally finished it in October. I mean, this book, for 1, it's fucking long, and 2, nothing really fucking happens until the last, like, 10 pages, and I feel like I didn't really get anything out of this book. This is, if you don't know what From Blood and Ash is, it's a book about Poppy. It's like a fantasy romance series, kind of like, okay, I didn't start the fantasy romance genre, but it started back in 2019, kind of like when ACOTAR came out too, so like, kind of started the trend almost of fantasy romance being really popular. This book follows Poppy, and Poppy is the maiden. She's never, you know, to be looked upon, touched, really supposed to have any communication. And then a change in her guard means that Hawk is now her guard. Hawk is sexy. And them meeting just sets off an entire chain reaction of events to where I am now, which is going to start the 3rd book. I don't know if I'm going to start the 3rd book until next year. I kind of need a break from this series. The books are really long. They're only going to get longer, as fantasy books do. So, and I just like, I mean, it's also the second book in a series. We know that a lot of second books in a series, fantasy series, tend to be pretty lacking, especially in longer series like this, where it's just like trying to bridge the gap between what happened in the first book with all the setup and what's going to happen in the final books. So, while I did read this book, and I will be continuing on with the series, it was a really fucking long book for, like, nothing to really feel like it happened. And Hawk and Poppy drive me fucking crazy. So, yes. That's all I have to say on that. We're just gonna wash my hands of that. This is gonna be a really chaotic wrap-up. So, just be prepared for that. Okay. Then I read The Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas. This is the first book in the Sunbearer duology. Aiden Thomas wrote The Cemetery Boys, which is probably one of the best books I've ever read. I think I read it in 2021. Fucking fantastic book. And it took me a while to get back into their other books. I know that their release, Lost in the Neverwoods, was not as well received as Cemetery Boys. But I finally decided to pick up Sunbearer Trials. And this is a Mexican-inspired fantasy. So, every 10 years, the gods... And this was like a very, like, urban-esque fantasy. If that makes sense. Like, there's, you know, like, stores and phones and reality TV kind of things. But every 10 years, the gods sort of have a competition where 10 children of the main gods are chosen to compete. And there's one Sunbearer, that is the winner, and then there is one sacrifice. And the life force of the sacrifice essentially goes out and sort of powers all of the temples around to protect the kingdom for the next 10 years until the next competition. So it's divided up into two kind of categories. There are gold gods, which are like the high tier gods, and there are the jade gods, which are considered like the lower tier gods. So the gods that like gold gods, you know, would be like water, fire, earth, and then the jade gods are like more niche kind of things like birds, bad luck, etc. So jade demigods, the children of the gods, semidios are never really chosen. The trials, it's particularly only jade or gold gods. Oh my god. It's really only gold gods. However, this year, 2 jade gods are chosen, and our main character, Teo, is one of them. And so it's sort of him joining this competition with 9 other sort of like teenagers, and they're all sort of battling for essentially not to die, because the loser will be sacrificed. And just beautiful writing. I just love Aiden Thomas has such a comforting writing style in a way that's like accessible but not like too niche, if that makes sense. Like, they use a lot of modern references, but I feel like it just adds to the story. I just love their characters, and just the ending was insane. I am just hoping that they release like 40 books next year. So insanely excited to read the continuation of the series, because the world was just so rich, the characters were just so rich. I loved it. I love it. I'm just gonna list every single book that I read for my reading witch romance books for 24 hours, because I read 6 books, I think, and I talked about them in that video, so go watch that video. How many times can I say go watch that video in a current video? And I'm just gonna run through them really quick because I already kind of talked about them. But I read A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon by Sarah Hawley, Back in a Spell by Lana Harper, Improbable Magic for Cynical Witches by Kate Salsa, What the Hex by Jessica Clare, Wishful Thinking by Celestine Martin, and Not the Witch You Wed by April Asher. So I read all 6 of those books. They were all all of our main characters in those books were witches for the most part. They were all kind of romance books, and I read them all for that video. And for them, had some hits. I liked A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon. I liked Improbable Magic. I liked Not the Witch You Wed, but... So I was about half and half. Like, I liked 3 of them, and I didn't like 3 of them. I liked 3, and I didn't like 3 kind of thing, but... Those are those books. I'm not going to go too in-depth about them. It's probably going to be the shortest wrap I've ever had. But, if you want me to go more in-depth about watching me read them, and then also my thoughts about them, go watch that reading vlog. I read One for My Enemy by Olive E. Blake. I did want to read this book in October, because witches. This book is also blowing up right now because Olive E. Blake's books just all got traditionally published. Unfortunately, I read this on my Kindle, or my tablet, which I wish I hadn't because I missed the artwork. So definitely read the physical copy of this book if you do decide to read it, because I feel like reading it virtually diminishes some of the quality of the artwork, which is just my honest opinion, but I do wish I would. Anyways, One for My Enemy is a Romeo and Juliet retelling in modern day New York about 2 warring witch families. So you have the Antonovas and the Antonova sisters and the Fedorov brothers. And yeah, this book was just like so much shit going on. So there's the Antonova sisters, there's 7 of them, and there's 3 of the brothers. And they're kind of in warring criminal witch families. And trying to maintain control over, like, the market of modern day New York. And it was a lot. The writing was beautiful. The story was fucking wild. I, like, ate it up. I thought it was really fun. I understand why it's so popular. I had a really good time reading this. I thought it was such an interesting take on witches, first of all. A really interesting take on Romeo and Juliet, second of all. And I thought that it was just complex and interesting and intriguing, and I really didn't want to put it down. It is slower in some parts, so definitely I didn't finish it right away, but I think that the writing is really beautiful, and I am really excited to pick up more of Olive E. Blake's work. And then I read A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. Becky Chambers is honestly one of my favorite authors. She has written the Wayfarers series, which is like a space opera epic that I highly, highly, highly recommend. But this is her newest duology. This is the first book. I don't know why this took me so long to read this fucking book, but this world is called Panga, and Panga was like a sort of industrialized world, and then suddenly all of the robots kind of became sentient, and we're like, actually, peace out. We're gonna go live in the forest. Like, never, ever talk to you guys again. Bye. And so Panga has sort of evolved as a life without machines, and this story is narrated through sibling Dex, and Dex is a tea monk, and they have sort of kind of been lost for a really long time. They decide that they are going to go on a travel, so they go out into the wilderness, and they run into the first robot that has made contact with humanity since the robots sort of like up and left thousands of years ago? Centuries. The robot and the monk essentially kind of have some philosophical discussions and go on a little adventure. And it's just good. I don't know. Becky Chambers just has such a beautiful way of writing. A way of writing without making you feel like you're reading something unnecessarily complex. Like, typically, if you were like, oh, I'm gonna read a book about a tea monk and a robot that have philosophical discussions, I would be like, that really doesn't seem up my alley. But because it's Becky Chambers, and because her writing style is so fantastic, it doesn't feel like you're reading something that's super philosophical. And while it is philosophical, it's accessibly philosophical. It's not like, when you read those literary books, and they're like, you just don't feel like you can get into it. It's just so easy to read and just made me cry and made me just... I really love Becky Chambers. So, I really recommend picking up any of her books. Like, I don't think I've made it out of a single one without crying. And while there's not really a lot of plot, it's just kind of like, just enjoyable to immerse yourself in the worlds that she's created. So, yeah. I read Horror Store by Grady Hendrix. Take a little bit of a 180 here. Horror Store is really weird. And this is an old Grady Hendrix book. Came out in 2014. And this is essentially Grady Hendrix making fun. Essentially, he has built a haunted IKEA. And the book is about employees that are in this haunted IKEA trying to figure out why it's haunted. It's not called IKEA, it's called like Orsk or something. This book was just fucking weird. Super short, and it was, I wish I had it. It was like really square. So it looks like a catalog. It was just funny. It was just a good old weird Grady Hendrix type of time. Really heavy on the body horror like Grady Hendrix likes to write in his books. But just fucking weird. Not necessarily like the best book I've ever read, but if you're looking for something that has humor and also super creepy with not a lot of plot, I would recommend this. Like, the characters are pretty one-dimensional and the plot itself was pretty mediocre, but it was just weird. It was just a weird fucking time. I definitely read it in one day. And it was just fun to kind of flip through, especially if you read the physical copy, because he has, like, he's created these pieces of furniture that he has descriptions for in the book. Like, it just reads like a catalog, and he did a really good job, like, designing it. I don't know if he did designing, but it was really well designed and everything, so that it read like you were reading, like, a catalog for a furniture store. But yeah, it was just fucking weird. So, I don't know. Pick it up if you want, but do prepared. Body horror abound. But I read The Housemaid's Secret by Frida McFadden. This is the second book in The Housemaid. The first book being... I think the first book is just called The Housemaid. Yes, the first book is just called The Housemaid. So, if you read The Housemaid, then you know I would continue on with the series. I'm not going to talk too much about the plot of this. But The Housemaid is about Millie, who got out of prison, and she can't get any jobs. She has a record. And she gets hired with this family. This is the plot of the first book, by the way. She gets hired by this family, and then it turns out that the woman that hired her, Nina, is like gaslighting her a bunch, and so there's just read this series. Because I know that, like, you might think a second book in a thriller series, like, what's the point? I'm here to tell you I thought that too, and then I read this book and I couldn't put it down. Frida McFadden does a lot of things right in this series, at least. I haven't read any of her other books, so I can't attest to them, but really short chapters, really engaging reads, and really interesting. Like, she does a good job of, like, ending the chapter on a cliffhanger, so you have to read the next chapter. Like, again, this was a book that I read in one day, same as The Housemaid. But this is essentially just, like, a continuation of Millie's story after the events of the first book. Which, I don't want to spoil what happens in the first book, but I do really recommend both of these series. I think they are fantastic thrillers. Fantastic if you, like, just want to curl up on, like, a rainy day and just binge a book. Like, I think these books were both super bingeable. You could honestly probably read both of them in one day, because it's really short, really easy, really fast-paced. So, that was The Housemaid's Secret. I know I talked a lot about The Housemaid. I think I did talk about The Housemaid in another one of my wrap-ups, but I don't remember which one. But, I don't know. I'm definitely going to read the third book in this series, too, because they're just so quick and easy to read. And then I read Unfortunately Yours by Tessa Bailey. This is the second book in a Vine mess, which is just a Tessa Bailey duology. I read the first one, which is called Secretly Yours. Worst Tessa Bailey. Well, okay. Excluding Fixer Up. Hated this book. I think Julian should go straight to jail. That being said, Unfortunately Yours was better. So this book is about August and Natalie. And August is an ex-SEAL. And Natalie is the brother of the love interest from the first book. And then her family, she's like the heiress to like a Napa winery. But she has kind of moved to New York and is making her way in the investment trading, I think. But August and Natalie kind of strike up a sham marriage to kind of both get what they want, which is Natalie will get her trust fund released to her so that she can go back to New York and open up her own firm and kind of like shove it to the people that fired her and cast her out when she made a bad trade. And then August will be in good enough standing with the bank that he can get a loan to continue his winery that he's doing in honor of his late best friend. Now, of course, they do have to make this marriage look legitimate because the person at the bank is in charge of Natalie's trust fund and in charge of giving August a loan, like, won't release it if it looks fishy. So they move in together, blah, 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 they fall in love. I actually really like this one. I teared up reading this book, and if you would have told me, okay, what happened when Summer excluded, if you would have told me a few months ago that I would cry reading a Tessa Bailey book, I would have told you were fucking insane. But I liked this one. I liked August and Natalie. I feel like they brought out the best in each other. I will say this book is really insta-lovey because I was like reading it and I was getting so into it, and then there was like a splash of cold water where one of the characters was like, "Can you believe it's only been a week since we got married?" And I was like, all this shit has happened in a week? That being said, I did like this book, you know? I mean, they're very Brendan Piper coded, you know, we've got the princess, and then we've got the, like, burly buff guy, but I don't know, you know, they learn to love each other, despite their differences. They've got really good banter, and, you know, with Tessa Bailey, the sex scenes are, like, 6 chapters long, so that was fun, but I don't know, it was a Tessa Bailey book. It was one of the better Tessa Bailey books I've read in a really long time, after all of the sort of losses that have been the Hot and Hammered series, and My Killer Vacation, and Secretly Yours. So, nice kind of refresh on the romance here. And then I read Rule of Wolves by Leigh Bardugo. This is the second book in the King of Stars duology, and yes, I finally fucking finished this book. There's a video coming out where you can kind of see me talk about my thoughts as I finish it, but let's go over it really quick. This is the second book in the King of Stars duology, which is the third series in the Grishaverse by Leigh Bardugo. Again, it's really hard to talk about this book because this is, again, like the third series. So I don't want to go too in-depth because there's just so fucking much in this series. Like, I think you could read the Grishaverse and Six of Crows separately, but I really wouldn't read the King of Scars duology unless you've read both of those series because, well, I think Six of Crows and the original Shadow and Bone trilogy kind of can stand on their own. The King of Scars duology takes so much from both of those series. Like, there's characters from both series, there's events from both series. But I really liked it. I'm really happy to be done, but I did really enjoy it. I wish it hadn't taken me so long because I kind of forgot the first half of everything that happened in this book. But that being said, I loved it. That being said, I liked it. I liked the ending. I also think that Miss Leigh Bardugo left it open so she can keep going back to this fucking world, and I respect her for that. Okay. And then I read Squad by Maggie Tokuda Hall and illustrated by Lisa Sterl. This is a graphic novel, actually. I picked this up kind of on a whim. I decided that I wanted to read it because Spooky Month. So this book is about Becca, and Becca goes to a new school, and she kind of gets wrapped up in the popular girls. She discovers that the popular girls are actually werewolves. This was just an easy, fun, sort of spooky read. Nothing too complicated, but I think the art was really beautiful. I think the story was interesting, and it kept me engaged all the way through. And it's a little bit gay, so. But yeah, I don't know. I thought it was fun. I thought it was easy to read. I think it would be great if you've been reading a lot of like thrillers or fantasy and want something that is a little bit different. Yeah, I don't know. I would recommend it. Just like a quick little horror comic that just was really fun to read. And then I read Ever After Always. I will also try to listen to a video, but this is the third book in the Bergman Brothers series, which is just a really long 7-book interconnected standalone romance series. I've read the first 2. This is the third one. This is Marriage in Crisis. We have Freya, who's the oldest sibling, and then her husband Aiden, and they are kind of going through some marriage troubles. Aiden's been having a lot of anxiety. He's been pushing Freya away. Freya's been pushing him away, blah, blah, blah. So they sort of go on vacation with Freya's giant fucking family to celebrate their parents, or Freya's parents' anniversary. And then they're also trying to slowly repair their marriage. I really liked this one. I'm not really a big, like, second chance, Marriage in Crisis kind of gal, but I did have a lot of fun with this. I think, so in the first 2 books, it's kind of been like stories on their own, but this one we got a lot of like sibling interaction content, which I thought was really, really sweet. I just love this series. I love these new covers also, by the way. Fucking gorgeous. I'm picturing it in my head, and you can see it right here, because editing M will put it in. But I just love this series. I think they're just really feel-good romances, and I did cry a little bit this one, not as hard as I cried in Always Only You. They always say the title of the book in the book, which I always think is really fun, because the titles are kind of like funky. Not funky, but like, they're not always like things that naturally come up in conversation. So it's just a really great if you're looking for a romance series to get into that has a lot of books, because I feel like a lot of romance series are like 2 to 3 books, but I think this one is really great. Like, you can just pick up a book wherever and you're right back in the world, and it has enough where it's not like you're like, oh, I finished that romance series, now I need to find another one, because there's 7 fucking siblings, so it's going on forever. We're down to the last book. This has been feels like a really chaotic wrap up, so thank you for sticking with me. Anyways, okay. The last book I read, we'll do the little physical copy. The Coldest Touch by Isabel Sterling. I did read this physical copy, actually, but I'm not going to hold it, so I'll put up a picture, because books are heavy. But this is just like a little YA fantasy book about Elise, and Elise has recently come into these powers where she touches people and she can see their death, and she is like, what the fuck is wrong with me? And then she meets Claire, and Claire is a vampire, and Claire is actually a employee of this paranormal organization called the Veil. And the Veil, essentially, Elise is the Death Oracle, and there's only one Death Oracle at a time, and when the Death Oracle dies, they pass the powers on to the next person. And Claire is tasked with, like, shepherding Elise into her newfound powers and becoming an employee of the Veil. And just a bunch of shit happens. This was nothing insane, but it was really fun. It was just cute and easy, and a good final book to sort of finish out October with. So, yeah, I don't know. Just a little cute, little queer, sort of paranormal book. So if you're looking for something that's vampires that makes fun of Twilight, this is the book for you. If you're looking for something that's YA paranormal that has unnecessary governmental structures, this is the book for you. If you're looking for a really easy to read little YA rom-com that's a little bit paranormal and queer, this is the book for you. I don't know. I think it's just a super easy read, and I would definitely recommend it to people that are just looking for a really quick paranormal book. And those are the 20 books I read in October. Yeah, thanks for watching. I will be in touch in my next video. Thank you. Bye.